Hey everybody, this is going to be a bit of a test video. You see, I want to get back into making YouTube videos, but I'm very lazy, and I wanted to do it just on my phone so I wouldn't have to bother my wife's computer. So, I'm going to try to make a YouTube video just using my phone. And for a test, I'm going to do a video about something that's been on my mind lately, so I know I can just talk about it off the cuff without needing heavy editing or scripting. The 7 people who should have never been President of the United States. Disclaimer, although this is definitely a video about political people, this is not a political video, and I'm not saying that these people shouldn't have been president because I don't like them. I'm saying that they shouldn't have been president because in some way, them getting to the presidency broke the rules of the presidency. So without much further ado, we're going to talk about the 5 people who won on a technicality. Those being John Quincy Adams, Rutherford B. Hayes, Benjamin Harrison, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. All 5 of those men did not get the popular vote. In the case of Rutherford B. Hayes, the other guy got more than 50% of the vote. In all of these cases, electoral college shenanigans happened. So either nobody got the majority and it went to Congress, and then the person who won wasn't the person with the most votes, or they somehow got the electoral college despite not getting the popular vote. In 2 of these cases, it was kind of rectified. See, in John Quincy Adams's winning election, Andrew Jackson actually got the popular vote. So you have this, and then Andrew Jackson went on to be president for the 2 terms after Quincy Adams. And also with Benjamin Harrison, Grover Cleveland, in his non-consecutive term, won the popular vote, but Benjamin Harrison got the electoral vote. So that's how Grover Cleveland had the non-consecutive term. The only one of these men to have won another term after their first term was George W. Bush. But there's a big argument that the reason that that happened was because of the Iraq War. So that's a little bit spicy in that all of these cases, the man did not continue to serve as president after winning on the technicality. And now, in the beginning of this video, I said 7. And then I've only talked about 5. So the other 2 are people who won because of vice presidential shenanigans. The first of which being one of my favorite presidents, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt should have never even been vice president, let alone president. Here's what had to happen, okay? William McKinley had already served 1 term from 1896 to 1900, and in that term, his vice president died in office, which means that the Republican Party had to find a new vice president. And who did they choose? They chose the governor of New York because he was too progressive, and the other Republicans in New York were like, dude, this guy's crazy, we got to get him away from an executive position that actually has power. Let's make him the vice president. So literally all he ever has to do is break a tie if in the Senate. The vice president doesn't have a lot of political power unless the president dies. Well, William McKinley got shot by an anarchist. So what happened was Theodore Roosevelt got to become president, even though the reason he was even vice president was because his party didn't want him to have any power. And then he ended up having even more power and doing a lot of positive for the nation. I really like Theodore Roosevelt, but I don't think he should have been president except for vice presidential party shenanigans. A man had to die, and then someone had to do some shady political dealing to even get him in the position to assume the power because another man had to die. So far I've talked about 6 people who I don't think they should have been president, technically, but they were still running on a presidential ballot. Like, even with Theodore Roosevelt, he was elected as vice president. This final person is the only person to have been president who was never elected on a presidential ballot, and it was Gerald Ford. The circumstances of Gerald Ford becoming president are, in my opinion, one of the biggest blights in American history on our political track record. So what had to happen was Richard Nixon had to resign. Now, Richard Nixon, for those of you who don't know anything about that person for whatever reason, needed to be impeached. He had lied under oath. He had hidden evidence of literally breaking the law from the people of the United States and the judicial system. He was going to be impeached. And also his vice president was going to be impeached. Not even for the same thing, for a completely different scandal. I believe that man's name was Andrew Spiro. That's the guy who was his vice president on the presidential ticket when he ran for election, when Nixon ran for election. So if he got impeached and Andrew Spiro got impeached, that would mean that the Speaker of the House would become president, and that was a Democrat, and they could not let that happen. If the Constitution were followed, I think it's fair to say that the Speaker of the House would have possibly become president, and they knew that. So what did Richard Nixon do? First thing that happened, Andrew Spiro resigned from the vice presidency. The next thing that happened was Gerald Ford was appointed vice president. He was just some guy in in Congress. He wasn't even in the executive branch. They just picked him because he had a squeaky clean record and he was in the Republican Party. And then Richard Nixon resigned, making his vice president into the president, which means Gerald Ford gets to be president. It's baloney. It's complete horse hockey. There's no reason for Gerald Ford to have been the president of the United States. And it shows in that he didn't even run for the election against Jimmy Carter the next turn around. So that's a problem. IMO. Anyway, that's it. That's the 7 people who shouldn't have been president. Hilariously, every single one of them except for one is a Republican. So, anyway, this isn't a political video. All of you have a great day. Bye-bye. Bonus 8th president? Chester A. Arthur. He was allegedly born in northern Vermont, but his family was moving around a lot when he was born, and he may have been a secret Canadian. Do